Hello everyone, this is Jotto, and welcome back to part 4 of my Trials Comprehensive Guide. Now, we just covered Order, and I'm now on to Wisdom. Quick thing, this will be the last video I cover before the patch hits. If the patch alters any Trials balance, then in my next video, or actually I think in the patch video, yeah, so here's what I'm going to do. Alright, so I'm going to be doing a podcast with my teammates on the patch notes in their full list. That's tomorrow at 1 p.m. CET. I'll put a link to the Reddit post in the description for anyone that's interested. But I'll also be doing a video of a shortened version. And to give you an idea of what that means, I mean condensing 3 hours into one, so it's still a long video. But the point is it's shorter. That, and I get to play with the cards for a couple days before I make my actual video on it. So that'll be shorter, and I think in that video I'll talk about any difference that has been caused by the patch in Trials balance. So stay tuned for that. So in terms of colors, it'll be covering Order and Wisdom. But in terms of if any heroes are changed, I also have to cover those. So anyway, you get the idea. So on to the video. I'll be covering this the same way. Brief overview on the heroes quickly again, and also the commons and uncommon focus, with rares and epics being the kind of what puts you into the double color. Now, first things first, heroes. We talked about these in the good hero section, and that reminds me I need to make a playlist of this series. So all three heroes are very, very good. Advanced Darius is top 2. I think in everyone's lists of good heroes, along with Cronus. Basic Darius is mid-tier, and Reich is higher mid-tier, to the point when I think a lot of people put him 4 or 5th. I saw one person put him 3rd in terms of strength. So good start for the heroes, especially considering the one that puts him into double blue is incredibly strong. So that is a bit of a weight towards the double blue. Now, if we switch over to common creatures, because this is important, this is what will base most of your deck. Now, we saw Order had a bit of an issue, being that most of their commons were awful, and even some of the okay ones weren't very good. So, yeah, but for Wisdom, we don't really have that issue. In fact, I think the worst of all of them is Airship Explorer, and Airship Explorer is not unpickable. He's not good, but it's not unpickable. You could actually pick it over some other commons. Charged Alright can be okay. 1/1 flyer isn't the end of the world, and it works with some of your energy synergies. So the more energy you have, the better the Alright gets. So it's not too bad. Disquisitive Spirit cycles. You can use it with Flash Freeze, which is also quite a common. Well, it is a common, but it's quite a common pickup whenever you see it. So Disquisitive is again A-okay. And the 1/1 flyer with 3 speed is surprisingly annoying. Golem. Generic 2-drop. It has upsides and downsides. Its upside doesn't die to Harpy, which is less of an issue. But its main upside is that you can play it for 1 mana past 2 aspects. You can play it now for 1 mana. It's the same reason why 2 mana, 2 aspect cards tend to be better than 3 mana 1 aspect later in the game, simply because you can play more of them at once. The other thing with Golem is it does mean you can go like 1-drop from 1 aspect and then 2-drop including Wisdom, and then like it lets you curve in multiple ways, but that's less of a pull. The main thing is it's a generic 2-drop that you can play much more easily if you top deck it later. It does have the weakness of being an artifact, which sucks against basically just gnomes, because all of the Rage artifact removal requires them to use a card, so it's not too bad. But gnomes are a bit devastating against the Golem. But anyway, Force Mage Protector, one of the best cards you can possibly pick. In fact, I went 10 and 1. Yeah, 10 and 1 with that Order, Wisdom, Reich deck that had 4 Protectors, and they were absurd. Protector is just insane because you get to put the shield on whenever you like. PSA on how to use shields, because this annoys the hell out of me whenever I see it. And being Mr. Tempo Wisdom, I've actually done all the theory crafting on this, since I sort of have an obsession with that deck. But anyway, only use the shield immediately if you're against red, because then it stops fireball and burn spells. Or you use the shield on a 3/3 or 3 attack creature against a minion because of assassinate. Or you use it on a 3 HP target if you're against corruption. Why? Because it's hard to remove for those aspects. If you're against wisdom, you use it on 1 HP creatures, but you don't have to do that immediately because 1 HP creatures aren't too valuable anyway. But if you need that 1 HP creature, say like an elf scout for blocking, use the shield because it could get flash freeze, etc. Things like that. Against nature, if you have more than 2 energy, keep it at 2 energy because otherwise Tornado Outbreak will blow you out. It's better to put shields on weaker creatures so they don't really know what to bounce. There's a lot of things that go into how you use energy. Things like when you're attacking against order, you want to leave enough energy on the protector to the point when it's more threatening for pacify, but you don't want to have like 8 energy just wasted, because that does happen if you have charged Orate that's been on the board for ages, for instance. So think about your opponent's removal and think about what you want your opponent to do or what he wants to do, and then use your shields adequately. Don't just use them for no reason. Sometimes it's better to save them, and against a lot of aspects it is just better to save them on the protector, but don't stockpile shields, things like that. If you can get blown up by removal, use your shields more liberally. That escaped me. But anyway, yeah, the point is people misplay protector a lot. It's not the easiest card to play with, but yeah, it is very, very strong. Something else, if it gets double attacked to the point when if you shield the protector, it dies anyway, shield something else. Just don't shield the protector and then just lose it. Shield something else, you get the counter on something else. Airship Explorer is pretty bad, but it's filtering, so it's not too awful. Spectral Aurite. This is actually one of the 3-speed heavy hitters in Wisdom that make them quite good in Trials. This and Library Guards. Library Guards is more powerful, but it's an uncommon. Spectral Aura is a surprising pain in the neck to deal with. It has the Phoenix stats of 3/3, 3-speed, and flying. Yes, it doesn't come back, but it's a common. But the point is that 3/3 with 3 speed is really hard to handle because it has flying. So don't underestimate this guy. Its ability doesn't come up much. It really doesn't. It will occasionally come up, but it's rare. But in general, decent creature, worth picking. I should pick it reasonably high. So we're off to a good start. Only 1 common creature not being very pickable. On to spells. This is where they're a bit weaker. So New Horizons isn't very good. It just is a dead card in hand later. And Astral Dive is way too situational to be picked a lot. I mean, it depends on how many energy cards you have, but it's a kind of thing where you pick it late in the draft because you have a bunch of Foundry Engineers and Protectors, not the other way around. However, the rest of their spells are quite good. Sleep is a nice stall effect that can be used on really pain-in-the-neck creatures like Dragon. Stalling a dragon for 2 turns is often what you need to win, and it's the same for things like Necromantic Cult, so don't underestimate the sleep. Spell removal is also pretty hard to come by, so yeah, don't underestimate the sleep. Flash Freeze is either quite good or ridiculously good, depending on your hero. It's quite good in general because it deals with 1 HP stuff and works with a lot of your dorky creatures like Disquisitive Spirit. But if you're playing Advanced Darius, this is one of the most insane removal spells in the game because you can just Flash Freeze end a turn for 1 mana and then say, my turn, hero power, and you just clear everything. So Flash Freeze is almost see it, you pick it with Advanced Darius, at least compared to other commons. But with other heroes, it's a good pick. It's not the highest pick. Like if I'm playing Nature Wisdom, I'll pick a lot of the nature creatures over Flash Freeze. And I'll pick Protector over Flash Freeze or something, but Flash Freeze is still a good removal spell, and it's surprisingly useful. And you're also in a faction that has card draw, so the 2-for-1 thing is less of a problem. Ancient Wisdom, not as good as it looks. If you're playing well, first of all, if you're playing basic Darius, you should avoid this like the plague. But in general, if your deck lacks card advantage, you should be picking these up. They're a lower end pick. I don't like having more than 2 ever. I do like having 1, but it also depends on how many library guards you got, for instance, and how lucky you were on those. So it's not as good as it looks. But overall, for the commons, Wisdom is very, very good. Compared to Order, which had 4 or something commons that were good. No, I had 5, because yeah, some of the spells are really, really good in Order. But compared to Order, it's not even close. Like, especially creature quality is way higher for Wisdom at the lower rarity. So, unless I missed anything. Nope. Moving on to uncommons, starting with the creatures. The uncommon creature slot is not fantastic for Wisdom. In fact, it's borderline abysmal. It's not quite as bad as Orders, where Order has 2 very good cards. Wisdom has 2 very good cards, and some fringe pickable ones. So, let's just get these out of the way. Contraptionist is completely useless. Force Wielder is not useless, but situational. And it's again like Astro Dive. Pick the energy stuff first, then the Force Wielder, not the other way round, because you may not be lucky enough to get the energy stuff. Then we have the trifecta of mediocre 3s. This is, yeah, these guys get laughed at a lot. So, Gym Battlemaster is okay. It can be very, very good in some situations, but in others it just dies to an Assassinate or a Fumes or a Fireball, since it only halves combat damage. So it's very, very good in combat, but if you're against any removal-based stuff, it's not fantastic, and it only has 2 speed, so even nature that doesn't have removal can ignore it half the time. Frost Elemental is not as bad as it looks. I actually have had some decent success with the random Frost Elemental in my deck. I would not pick these like normally, but against some of the other really, really, really bad cards, I have picked Frost Elemental just once per draft, and it's been okay. It's not the worst card you can get. Again, with Advanced Aris, it's much stronger because you can combo this with the hero power. Lightning Elemental, I personally think, is the best of these 3. 4 speed is an incredibly rare speed total. Only Elf Scout matches this thing speed-wise. Now, it is atrocious against Dominion because of Bloodseeker Mutant. But in general, shocking a big creature is not the worst effect in the world, and it will sometimes do some good stuff. It's also quite good with Reich. But the problem is that 1 HP is depressingly low. It opens it to a lot of very, very easy removal for basically nothing. So yeah, not fantastic. This group of 3 at the bottom, though, is quite good. We've got Foundry that can just win the game sometimes on its own if they don't have removal for it, and should not be underestimated. It's one of the things that puts you into energy, actually. If you have 2 or 3 Foundries, you see an energy card, you pick an energy card, as far as I'm concerned. Like, Charged Aura is especially the insane one, but you even go into Thaumic Laboratory for double blue at that point. Because that's just ridiculous if you get your 3 Foundries, and you can also get Protectors at common, so the energy deck does exist. So, Foundry Engineers is a very, very strong card. It's not the strongest uncommon they have access to. That is Library Guards. Library Guards is, you see, you pick. I actually have some issues debating which is stronger, Library Guards or Mutant, in Trials. I think it's Mutant. It is very close. And in Constructed, it's, again, borderline. I have said Library Guards is the best creature in the game before. When I did my my top 10 creatures, it was at number 1, although the balance has changed quite a lot. I actually think Harpy and Mutant are very, very close to it now, and also Dominion's Incarnate. But in general, if you see Library Guards, you pick Library Guards, and I think Mutant depends on your deck. If you have a bunch of Mutants already, I think you just keep picking them because they get better the more you have. Library Guards is just crazy, though. The fact that it's even a debate against Mutant is just how strong that card is. Card advantage and a good body. Gnome Power Engineer. This used to be a see gnome pick gnome type of thing when it could deal with both spells and artifacts. Now I'm happy with 1. There's a lot of implants running around in Dominion especially, and a lot of the higher win rate decks have 1 helm or maybe even 2 helms in them, so I will actually be okay with having 2 gnomes, although usually I'll pick the first one I see and then leave it at that. But it's a surprisingly useful effect, and not underestimate it. Again, the energy transfer doesn't come up a lot, but it does sometimes. So a bit weaker on the uncommons for creatures, but it's not atrocious. They do have 3 solid picks, and then the trifecta of 3 drops is not awful. So yeah, they have a lot of situational picks, but it's not too bad. Spells. They only have 2 uncommon spells, and they're both not bad. Force Field is something which I used to have 0 respect for, and now I no longer have 0 respect for it. It's actually surprisingly useful. I had 1 Force Field in my 10-win deck with Reich, and it did a surprising amount of work. It actually won me a few games. Especially against red, this gets ridiculous, but red isn't too popular. It also works quite well against Dominion because a lot of their most powerful cards have low attack numbers, but are very, very difficult to handle, like the Assassin. That stupid Shadow Self Assassin that will deadly everything and trades with anything it wants to. So yeah, Force Field is very, very good in that regard. It also makes Coronis Ravens completely useless if he can't get damage in. So you'd be surprised how useful Force Field is. Maintaining it is difficult. I would say it's quite rare. It's one of those things where if you picked Atomic Laboratory because you didn't really have a choice, it's not the worst skill shrine, but if you have Atomic Laboratory, that works. That's Infinite Force Field. I actually would not feel too bad about picking Atomic Laboratory if I had a Force Field. I think you need a couple other energy cards though. If you have like 2 Protectors and a Foundry Engineers and a Force Field, yeah, sure, I'd pick Atomic Laboratory. But, yeah, Force Field's one of those cards that's okay on its own. It's not a high pick, but don't underestimate it. Disarm. The most underplayed and underestimated card in the entire game. I think it was Snellion that said that a lot last year, but the amount of games this wins is absurd. I would actually... The more and more I play with this, the more and more I pick it. It's just really good. Especially against implants and the high-speed elves. Because elves relies a lot on tempo, and if you disarm 2 of their attacks that they use to get good trades, and then you attack back, they're in trouble. Especially with Wisdom, because you have a lot of high-speed heavy hitters like Spectral Aurate. But Disarm is absolutely crazy sometimes. It's incredibly good against... Dominion in particular, because they have implants that tick down over time, so they're on a bit of a timer to losing their creatures. They want to get as much done with the implant as possible, and if you disarm an Overcharger, yeah, that's some value right there. Now, keep in mind, you can do this any combat, it's not just when they're attacking. It's not like Pacify, you can do this when you're attacking into their creatures to get some favorable attacks in. I think the maximum of these you want is 2. The first one is very, very good. It's not over Library Guards or anything, but it's over the trifecta of mediocre 3-drops, that's for sure. It's not a bad card. I would definitely not underestimate this. That, and it's very difficult to play around. Playing around Flash Freeze is a little easier because you just say if you have Flash Freeze, oh, they trade, that's fine. Playing around Disarm is quite tricky. And it's also the kind of thing where if you're playing with, say, Order, it has less of an effect because they're worried about tricks at 2 mana anyway. But if you're playing with something like Corruption, people are going to walk smack into this because no one remembers about Disarm. It's kind of crazy. No, I don't think there are any artifacts yet. Atomic Laboratory. Mentioned this briefly with Force Field, but this is the kind of card which you can only really pick up if you've got 4 energy cards or more. If you do, keeping in mind a lot of the energy cards are quite good. And I didn't really include Spectral Aurite in that count. You kind of can. I don't know, Spectral Aurate is the kind of thing where it works on its base body and not really on energy synergy as much, although hitting for 5 is handy. It lets you kill some of the really big creatures, so yeah, I'll include Spectral Aurate back in there. But yeah, if you have 4 or more of Protector, Foundry Engineers, and like maybe Force Field, that's the weaker one, and then Spectral Aurate, you can pick up your Atomic Laboratory. But going into double blue is difficult. If you have Advanced Aris, go for it. You're in double blue anyway. But yeah, it won't pull you into double blue unless you have an excessive amount of energy cards. There are cards that will pull you into double blue, and one of them works very well with Atomic Laboratory, which is Dust Titan. So yeah, it's not a bad skill shrine. It's not an amazing skill shrine, but it's in the playable section, and that's what you can really ask for when it comes to shrines. So, moving on to the rares and epics. Let's get rid of the heroes there. This is an interesting set for Wisdom because this is one of those weird things where half of their rares are... Oh, not even half. Most of their rares are unplayable. I mean, completely unplayable. Like with the Order had some situational ones. Oh no, Grand Institute, one of the worst skill shrines in the entire game. I think in Trials it's so, I mean, in Constructed as well, but especially in Trials, it's so unusable, it's laughable. Like it's just insane how bad this is. It's like Triangelica level. In fact, I think it's worse than Triangelica. Uh, Nah, I'm not sure it's worse than Triangelica, because at least its effect does something. It kind of does something, not really. So, yeah, it's at the bottom of the barrel. Then we've got Obelisk, which isn't very good. At least it cycles. I mean, the only time Obelisk was handy was actually in my last Wisdom trial run, where I had a Guardian of the Faithful in a deck that was double blue focused. So in one game, I got an Obelisk down early and managed to switch levels over to the Guardian, but it was so uncommon, and I could have just gone up to a second aspect anyway. So yeah, those are bad. Then you got Word of Knowledge again in the unplayable words section. Unstable Reactor, meh. It's it's a cool card to build around. Doesn't work in Trials. Most of the energy synergy you got, unless you have a force field, I guess, but most of the energy synergy is going into things like Foundry Engineers that makes golems that sets off the reactor. Yeah, that's a problem. You can use it with Dust Titan, I guess, if you're lucky enough to get two different rares. It's not unpickable, but it's not good. Electrostatic Storm. Again, not good. Randomness is not something you want to handle. Double blue on turn 4. Yeah, not something you want to be doing. And it hits your own stuff, and you're not playing a deck that can just play 0 creatures and rely on lamps to win. So again, not very pickable. Thaumic Reflector, too situational and too slow. You won't have enough spells to make this work, so not pickable. This is not a good trend here. In fact, out of all the rares, only 3 of them are pickable. Granted, these 3 rares are absolutely insane. Runelit Incarnate is a crazy strong 2-drop because you just play it, and then you put it on back row, and then you move it forward 6 turns later, and then they die. Yeah, it just sits around and gets bigger and bigger and bigger, and they have serious issues dealing with this thing. That, and if you're lucky enough to draft Atomic Laboratory with this, it gets silly. Random other comment. Runelit Incarnate in Order Wisdom as a combo is completely overpowered in Trials because you can put a Touch of Light counter on it, and it's indestructible in combat. It can't die because it doesn't take damage once it goes down to 0 energy. It also doesn't die to deadly. And considering how much Dominion is in Trials, not dying to deadly is a very, very favourable advantage. In fact, it doesn't just not die to deadly, it's excessively good against deadly. So for those of you who don't know how this interaction works, since it's easy to miss it with things like Shadow Step Assassin that only deals 1 damage, if your opponent has a Murder Instinct on a 4-4, and you block it with a Runelit Incarnate, the Murder Instinct deals 1 damage to the Runelit Incarnate, and that's it. It doesn't take the 4. It only takes 1 because that's how deadly works. It also means Dread Knight is woefully bad against Runelit Incarnate. You can brick wall a Dread Knight for eternity with a Runelit Incarnate because it will gain its energy back at the beginning of each turn. So yeah, deadly is bad against Runelit Incarnate, I'll put it that way. Frozen is actually, it's, I think, worse. Because Frozen doesn't affect it, basically. Or, let's see if I can remember how this works. It doesn't die when it takes damage due to the Frozen effect, but I think it only takes 1 damage when it's attacked, meaning everything becomes deadly, and then it can't die. I actually don't, or it can't die just from normal damage. I actually don't know how that one works, because a Frozen Runelit Incarnate is a rarity. But anyway, on top of that, it basically has to be assassinated or fumed or something like that, and that's easy and constructed. Not in Trials, so yeah, it's a completely broken 2-drop, and you should definitely pick it up in Trials, especially considering you may think, well, if you have issues moving it forward from back row, they're just going to start attacking it, right? Yeah, if you're playing Advanced Darius, it gets even sillier, because you're in double blue, so you may have Atomic Laboratory, but you can also just move it forward when it's huge, use the hero power to clear out all the small stuff, and then they can't attack the Runelit Incarnate, so it can start swinging. So yeah, it's absolutely crazy in Advanced Darius. That is not the strongest of the rares, though, in Wisdom. The other 2, these are the 2 heavy-hitting cards that put you into the Carlo combo. Lamp. Lamp is a disgusting Trials card. It's just ridiculous. It's so powerful that you can actually be playing a double color focused on any other aspect, and I think picking lamp is correct. Just for the lamp, going double level I think is strong enough. It's a stupid strong card. It's basically a 5 mana 2 aspect, well 3 or 4 aspect in some cases. 4/3 with 3 speed and swift. It's crazy. It also can't be removed very easily by anyone. Basically, artifact removal is all that does it, and artifact removal is rare, so I guess Wisdom has the best out to it. Rage can, but then you just say, well, they have to hold up 3 mana for the rest of the game, and you just never activate the lamp, and then they waste a whole bunch of their time. So it's good against every single color. Now, I want to point out, be careful activating this in defense. You don't want to be doing that unless you're going to lose. Because it opens it up to non-instant speed removal, like Fumes, because it's there after combat on their turn. This also works shockingly well with Reich, because it makes a 4/3 speed token from the Reich hero power, which is just crazy. And it also matches incredibly well against all the 2/3s that are very, very prevalent in Trials. And I got disconnected for inactivity. I hate it when that happens. But anyway, it's very, very well matched against a lot of the higher stat. Let's see if I can just get everything up here. Anyway, it's very well matched against a lot of the higher stat threats. The only thing it does match up fantastically against is Haldiri, but you can use Protector, and that gets even crazier. So Lamp is absolutely nuts. It's not game winning on its own nuts, but it can be, and if you get multiple copies it just gets silly. Now the last of the rares is Dust Titan. Dust Titan is a very interesting card that was actually nerfed because of its ability to just stop everything. So shock on an ability is crazy. Now you can use this to shock something for 3 turns in a row, if I recall. See if I remember how this works. So you play it, you shock something, it can't attack. You then shock it again, and it can't attack. And yeah, and then they have a turn to actually do something with it. After 3 turns of being stalled, they have a turn to actually do something with that creature. However, if you've got energy synergy, this gets ridiculous, and Atomic Laboratory gets rather silly with this, and so does Unstable Reactor. But Unstable Reactor is not something you really can rely on since it's a rare. But Dust Titan and Lamp are the 2 cards that will put you into the color combo because they are so heavy hitting in terms of just their sheer power level. So that will definitely put you into the double color if Advanced Eras didn't already. Now, as for the epics, this is an interesting one because I think Jinna Wishes is pretty bad. You're not going to have that many spells, so its effect is just not good. So it's a 2/5 for an insane cost. Yeah, I'd rather play a Spectral, alright, for that on curve instead of this. So yeah, I don't really like Jin. It's not unpickable, but it's not very good. It's the kind of thing where its effect will not hit very often, so you'll often just leave it at end of turn for a blocker. And if you don't need it, or if it lives until end of turn, use the ability, you might as well, since it's just going to ready up the next turn regardless, so maybe you might get lucky and draw something. Silencer, however. Silencer is a very, very strong card. It's one of the heavy-hitting 4-aspect cards. Some of them are quite weak, but, well, actually, I think pretty much all of them are very strong in Trials. I'm trying to think of one that really isn't. Grand Reunion isn't too good, but the rest of them I think are very, very powerful in Trials. And Silencer will usually trade 2 for 1, but its main strength is you gain a bit of advantage on board, and then Silencer wins the game immediately. And that will happen a lot in Trials, where you'll gain a bit of an advantage, then they'll gain a bit of an advantage, back and forth, and Silencer just says no. As soon as you gain advantage, if you have 4 mana lying around, you win the game, basically. So Silencer is very strong. 2 Silencers, if you're lucky enough to get 2 Silencers, sure, it's okay. 3, I would not pick a 3rd one, ever. I don't think it's worth it. Now, compared this to a lot of the other epics, so I mean, just compare it to Atrial and the Mirror that we already saw, I think it's weaker than Atrial and the Mirror, simply because they can do more on the board actively, where Silencer is a lockout card, but can't do anything to the board itself. So that's where I'll put it on the scale for that. But anyway, that's the entire overview for Wisdom. the aspect itself is a lot stronger than order. I think this is in the higher tiers for aspect. I would put it at third, personally, behind Dominion and Nature in that order, which we'll see a little bit later. Although, actually, by the time I do the Nature overview, there will have been a patch, so maybe it will change a bit. I doubt it will change enough to, like, rebalance the entirety of Trials, but, yeah, in the current balance of the game, I think I put Wisdom as the third strongest aspect. And I think there's a bit of a gap between the top three and then the bottom three. But anyway, thank you all for watching. If you like the content, please subscribe. If you have any feedback, put it in the comment section below and ask me any questions about the video. But as for now, it's been Jotto, signing off.